Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https://theshadows me, and as always, don't look behind you. They walk too well. Chapter 1. The Wash. The call came through dispatch at 6:47 a.m. Missing hiker. Male. Solo. Last seen entering the basin near Dry Mesa Trailhead. No return for over 48 hours. Tracker teams turn back. One sighted. Equipment malfunctions. Wildlife officer Caleb Vance tapped the dash of his truck twice before killing the engine. Dust hadn't even settled on his windshield when the silence hit. It was always too quiet out here. Dry Mesa was less a trailhead than a wound in the landscape, an ancient arroyo choked with pale stone and collapsed brush. In older maps, it had been labeled Sailkeet Seku, White Rock Canyon. Locals just called it the Wash. Caleb preferred the modern name. It created a line, a way to stay detached. Objective. His boots hit gravel with a dull crunch. Already, the sun was bruising the horizon, casting long, blood-colored shadows from the brittle pinyon trees. He checked his gear. Thermal cam, hydration pack, sidearm. A longbow-shaped stiffness lingered in his shoulders, an ache he never quite lost after the winter patrols. But this was supposed to be routine. Another solo hiker who underestimated the land. As he descended into the wash, something felt wrong. Not seen, not heard, sensed. The kind of wrong that makes the hairs behind your ears rise before you even know why. The first thing he found wasn't a footprint, it was a handprint. 5 clear indentations, splayed wide in the dry sand, as if someone had crawled across the arroyo floor. Elbow marks were absent, no drag, just hand after hand after hand leading deeper into the canyon. Caleb crouched, running a calloused thumb across the nearest print. The sand was soft, but not enough for clarity like this. These were recent, maybe hours old. He glanced uphill, no other tracks. Not a single coyote path, not a snapped twig, just the hands. As he moved forward, the radio on his chest crackled. Not words, just a stutter of static. It popped like a breath, then quiet again. Caleb lifted the thermal cam, scanning the path ahead. The world bloomed in oranges and blues. Rock walls shimmered with heat held from yesterday's sun, but in the distance, toward a jut of pale granite, a faint, cold bloom pulsed in the camera's frame. It was shaped like a person, but not moving, not exactly. He zoomed in. The shape jittered slightly, frame by frame, as if the image was being repainted, not filmed. One leg forward, then back, then forward again, looping. Then it vanished. He lowered the cam, heart hammering. The canyon ahead was empty. A chill ran through him, not from the air, but from something else. A pattern was forming, in the way the air moved, in the pacing of the handprints, in how the wind didn't howl, it listened. He stepped over the first print, then the next, and the next. Behind him, the breeze shifted direction, and with it came a soft rhythm, not leaves, not footsteps, mirrored movement, like someone was matching his pace, exactly, but never touching the ground. Chapter 2. Symmetry. Caleb didn't look behind him. That's something they drilled into you in the field. Don't look if you don't hear a reason to. There were 100 sounds in the wild that could convince you something was there. The trick was knowing which ones were real, which ones wanted you to look. But still, every few steps, that mirroring persisted, like 2 boots hitting sand in perfect rhythm. No crunch, no scatter of gravel, just pressure, just presence. He stopped, and so did it. The wash narrowed as he moved forward, the bleached canyon walls slanting toward each other like ancient bookends. Dried lichen clung to the surface like veins beneath parchment. The scent shifted too, less like sagebrush, more like salt. Metallic, cold, He crouched near a cluster of rocks and unfolded the thermal camera again. The screen lit in pulses. Ambient heat ghosted the horizon, nothing humanoid within 50 feet. He panned slowly there. A figure, half silhouetted on the ridge above, not on the trail, watching the trail. It didn't move, not when he zoomed, not when he tilted the lens. Then he blinked, and it was gone. The heat signature still lingered, a dull smudge on the slate behind it, like something had been burned into the frame of the world. He stood, brushing sand from his knees, and continued forward. The trail deepened here, carved by flash floods and years of erosion. Fewer handprints now, only the occasional scuff. But his skin began to itch beneath his shirt, a crawling static that rose up the back of his neck like spider legs. That's when he found the hiker's camp. It was barely 100 yards deeper into the canyon, tucked into the hollow between two boulders. Sleeping roll, lightweight pack, empty water bladder, all neatly set up. The fire pit was untouched, wood unburned, unlit, but something was wrong. Caleb knelt and opened the backpack. Inside was a rolled map, not GPS printed, hand-drawn. Dotted lines marked several canyons, all eventually led to the basin's heart. At the center, written in fine ink, "Where they step too well," Caleb stared. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost clinical, the kind of lettering that someone would take an hour to get right. He turned the page over. On the back was a series of sketches. Limbs in different positions, walking, stepping, bending, all labeled, all annotated with notes like, "Too clean, no weight shift, gait patterned, not organic." And beneath the final sketch, a full human silhouette drawn from the back, every line of the spine and shoulder perfectly centered. "This one isn't broken. That's why it's wrong." The hair on Caleb's arm stood on end. Something nearby clicked, soft, mechanical. He turned slowly. A trail cam, mounted high on the canyon wall. It was older, wildlife grade, not civilian, but it was active. The red LED pulsed twice, signaling motion capture. He pulled out his phone, pinged the network. No signal, no satellite coverage this deep. Still, he climbed the ledge, unlatched the casing, and retrieved the SD card. Slotted it into his handheld. The video began to play. Date, 2 nights ago. The missing hiker walked into frame. Alone, headlamp off, holding something, a branch, a spear. He looked back once over his shoulder. Then, out of the shadows, another him stepped into frame. Identical, but walking in perfect posture. No stagger, no head twitch, no blink, just a glide. A clean, flawless replication. The real hiker took a step back. The double raised one hand. The real one screamed, but there was no sound. The camera glitched. For exactly 3 seconds, the entire image tore sideways, like the air was pulled apart. When it refocused, only one man remained. Caleb rewound, paused, compared frames. The survivor wasn't the original. His shirt had changed, slightly. His walk was straighter. And when he turned to leave, he didn't look at the ground. He didn't blink. Just walked, frame by frame, out of view, like he knew exactly where to step. Chapter 3, Dissonance. By the time Caleb returned to the wash floor, the sun had crawled high enough to bleach the canyon walls in flat gold. But the warmth didn't touch him. Something in the air felt reversed, like the heat was being pulled inward, siphoned through the rocks beneath his boots. He took out his compass. North spun in slow circles. "Great," he muttered, tucking it away. The SD card felt heavy in his vest pocket, like it had weight beyond its plastic. He kept seeing that footage, the step-for-step mimicry, the way the double didn't move like something carrying weight. The human gait is messy, asymmetrical. That thing, it walked like it had read about walking. And now, so far out in the canyon, Caleb was beginning to feel it in his own body, an alien stiffness in his knees, a ghost of motion that didn't belong to him. He stopped to sip from his canteen. As he did, he caught his reflection in the water's curve, and froze. His face was smiling, but he wasn't. He stared. It lasted only a second, just long enough for the corners of his reflection's mouth to twitch upward before matching his real, frozen expression. He dropped the canteen. Water soaked into the sand, leaving no puddle. He crouched to pick it up, and just past the lip of a nearby stone, he noticed something pale. He crept closer. A piece of clothing, part of a jacket, buried in a narrow crack in the rock. It looked torn but clean. He reached in, pulled it free. It was the same jacket the original hiker wore in the video, except it had no blood, no dirt, no sign of struggle. It had been shed, not ripped. Suddenly, something clicked in Caleb's memory. The sketch in the journal. This one isn't broken. That's why it's wrong. He'd been out here nearly 4 hours. The last thing dispatch would expect from him was radio silence this long. He reached up to his shoulder unit and clicked the mic. BZZZK, static. Then a long, slow exhale, like breath on glass. Unit 4, status check, Caleb said. Confirm voice, over. Silence. Then, softly, his own voice. Over. He stiffened. The canyon echoed flatly. No directional source. No wind. He pressed the mic again. Dispatch, this is Officer Vance. Copy transmission. Another pause. Then low and distant. Again his voice. Over. This time it laughed. Caleb stood, drawing his sidearm. He slowly turned a full circle. No movement. The echo hadn't bounced off the walls. It had come through the rocks, beneath them. He took a shaky step forward and felt the strangest sensation, like he was falling into rhythm with something else. His arms swung, his heels struck the earth, but he wasn't leading the motion. Something was mirroring him again. He froze mid-step. The wind stopped. A shadow ahead lengthened without anything to cast it. It bent toward him, upright, featureless, its shape all wrong, not fluid, not reactive. It stood in pose, like it was waiting for a cue. Caleb backed away slowly, but the shadow did not move. Then, from behind him, he heard another step, crunch, identical to his own, and another, closer. He spun. Nothing, except his own boot prints trailing off behind him. But he hadn't come that way. His boot prints were going both directions. Chapter 4. The thing that watches the imitation. Caleb tried to breathe slow, but it kept catching in his throat. Something wasn't right with the air here. It wasn't elevation. It wasn't heat stroke. It was timing. He took 3 steps forward and the canyon returned 2, not echo, response. He could feel it in the soles of his boots, in the twitch of the muscles just behind his jaw. The trail he followed curved left around a tall reed rock bluff, narrowing until it pinched into a stone passage barely shoulder-width wide, the kind of place that twisted the acoustics of your own footsteps. Every movement now sounded doubled, mirrored with surgical precision, but always a hair off. Ahead, he could see where the path widened again. A dry riverbed, pale as bone. He pressed forward, sweat sliding down the side of his face, breath fogging faintly in the still air despite the heat. As he stepped into the clearing, his body locked. On the far side of the riverbed stood a figure. It wasn't walking. It was waiting, upright, hands hanging precisely at its sides, legs placed exactly beneath its hips, like joints had been measured into place. The skin was wrong, not the texture, but the tone, too even, no freckles, no sunburn, like a test rendering of a human body that never got past the shading phase. But worst of all was the face. It was his, Caleb's own, mouth neutral, eyes blank, but locked directly onto him. And then, without moving its head, it smiled. Not wide, not expressive, just a slow curve, as if the muscles had read about joy once and were now practicing in the mirror. Caleb took a step backward, so did it, in perfect unison. A pulse of nausea rippled through him. Something behind his sternum tugged, like a string had been tied to his heart and was being pulled northward, upward. He looked at the cliff walls surrounding the clearing, and that's when he saw the third presence. It wasn't a person, not standing. It was perched about 30 feet up on a ledge carved naturally into the stone. Its limbs were too long, joints reversed. It clung like an insect might, elbows bent high and out, chin angled unnaturally forward. No face. But it was watching, both of them, watching him, and the thing wearing his face. As if it were judging something, comparing. The imposter took a step forward. Caleb didn't move. It tilted its head slightly, mimicking curiosity, or maybe testing it. Then the perched thing on the cliff clicked once. A sharp, wet sound, like bones snapping in reverse. Instantly, the mimic dropped to all fours and began crawling toward Caleb. Fast, no sound. Just impact, the crunch of limbs hitting earth in perfect intervals. Caleb didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, back through the stone pinch. boot slipping on loose shale, scraping knuckles against the canyon wall as he ducked through the narrow, skin catching on sandstone. He heard the thing behind him stop moving the moment he passed the curve. It didn't follow, but he could feel its gaze, their gaze, stretching through the rock, as if they'd decided something, as if he'd failed a test he didn't know he was taking. His radio buzzed in his ear, a voice, but not his own. Next time, wear the smile first. Static, then silence. Chapter 5. Salt print. Caleb didn't stop running until his lungs gave out. The canyon narrowed behind him, swallowing light. That stretch where the mimic had followed on all fours, it had bled something from him. His limbs still worked. His breath returned. But something in his memory felt fuzzed, like a page dog-eared the wrong way. He didn't know how long he sat there, pressed against the sun-warmed stone, listening for movement. But none came. Not a single echo, not a single footfall. Only the whisper of dry wind threading through the high cliffs. Then a scent, sharp, saline, almost metallic. He followed it. The terrain changed. The copper sands gave way to fine, powdery white salt flats cutting across a dry wash that hadn't seen water in years. The ground was flat and cracked in wide rings, brittle beneath his boots. That's when he saw the first footprint. Just one, a bare sole burned black into the surface, like it had been scorched into the salt. He crouched and touched it. The salt was cold. Another step 5 feet forward, another print, then another. They formed a wide arc, crossing the wash in a slow, deliberate spiral, not a path, a pattern. Caleb followed it. At the spiral's center was a book, a weather-worn field journal, the kind used by backpackers and researchers. Its leather cover was scorched at the edges, but intact. He flipped it open. The pages were full of handwritten notes, entries dated only days ago. But the ink shimmered wetly, like it had been written minutes before. Each entry began with the same words, "I see me again today." Caleb scanned further. It's not just the way it moves, it's the way it waits, like it's not done becoming me yet. Another, "I slept last night. I woke up further down the trail. This salt on my tongue, I never left camp." And another, "The watchers above the ridge, they don't move. But they always face toward the copy, never me." Caleb turned the next page and stopped. A detailed sketch, his own face, or something wearing it, labeled beneath in blocky, shaken handwriting. It hasn't learned to sweat yet, but it will. Then, beneath that hastily scribbled, like written mid-panic, "If you're reading this, don't run toward your own voice. It isn't calling you, it's counting." At the bottom of the page was a smudged thumbprint, not ink, blood, and a note, "Look behind you." Caleb stood up, heartbeat pounding so loud it blurred his thoughts. He turned slowly, nothing there, just more salt. But the spiral of footprints was gone. The wind hadn't disturbed the prints, the dust hadn't filled them. They'd been undone, smoothed clean, as if the thing had decided it no longer needed them. Suddenly, his shoulder mic crackled. "Unit 4, confirm." A clear voice this time, dispatch. Caleb grabbed the mic. "I'm here, copy that. I need extraction coordinates. I think I..." A second voice cut through the signal, his own. "No, you don't." The transmission glitched, and then his voice again, softer but closer. "You're already here." He looked back at the book. The last page was turning, on its own. Chapter 6. Ashline. The journal wouldn't stay closed. Caleb had tucked it into his pack, zipped it tight, but every time he turned around, it was in his hands again. Pages fluttering, spine creaking like something trying to breathe through parchment. He didn't try to explain it anymore, not after what he'd seen. Instead, he followed the wind west toward the ridge line. Not because he wanted to, because the footprints had ended, and something had to start again. It began as a shift in color. The pale salt trail faded out and gave way to a narrow path cut into the shale, lined with fine black powder. Not dust, not soot, ash, and it was warm underfoot. Wherever it came from, it had been burned recently. It marked a trail too clean to be natural, like something had been dragged or walked the same route again and again. The ash was disturbed only in the center, like bare feet had paced it daily, religiously. Caleb crouched and touched the ash. It clung to his fingertips. When he wiped them on his jeans, they left no mark. He kept walking. The trail narrowed again, winding up a sloped ridge until he could see across the basin toward a low structure squatting against the horizon. His station, only it wasn't. Same frame, same angled tin roof, even the same porch light flickering softly in the daylight like a mistake. But this one had no ranger insignia on the siding, no government placard. The walls were too clean, not weathered, not aged. This station was new or recently built, and it shouldn't exist. As Caleb stepped onto the porch, the light stopped flickering. He heard movement inside, not scurrying, not hiding, living. He reached for the doorknob, then stopped. The scent of coffee drifted through the air. Bitter, familiar. His hand trembled as he pushed open the door. The inside was identical to his own quarters, down to the framed map over the desk, down to the exact boots beside the cot, his boots down to the torn lace. Standing in the kitchenette was a man in a ranger's shirt, back turned, pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. The man turned. It was Caleb, but smoother, like it had been peeled and reapplied. Figured you'd find it eventually, the thing said, voice perfect. Even the way he scratched his jaw, identical. Caleb reached for the radio on his shoulder. The other Caleb held up his own, already broadcasting. "Help," it said in Caleb's own voice. "He's not me." Then he smiled. They always believe the first one to call. Caleb stepped back, but the ash outside had begun to rise, coiling up the porch stairs like smoke in reverse. The other Caleb raised the second mug. "You'll forget your name soon enough. That's how we start. Empty the vessel, fill it again." Behind him, the coffee bubbled, but it was black ash dripping from the pot. Caleb ran. He didn't look back this time, not until he reached the ridge line again. Only then did he stop, just long enough to see the station collapse inward like a folding lung. Not burning, not crushed, just closing like a cocoon, finally tired of pretending to be wood. He dropped to his knees. In his backpack, the journal flipped open on its own. A new page had been added. Ash confirms the shape of the mold. They are walking well now. He tried. We're grateful. Next subject, Caleb Wren. Begin overwrite at dusk. He checked his watch. 4:59 p.m. and the sun was already touching the horizon. Chapter 7, Echo of Bone. The descent took longer than it should have. Caleb tripped twice, once hard enough to split the skin above his right knee. He felt none of it. His nerves had dulled, gone cotton soft, like his body wasn't quite inside itself anymore. He didn't know if it was blood or ash crusting his pant leg. Didn't stop to check. Every tree he passed felt like it was watching, not seeing, recognizing. The wind had changed again. No longer dry and warm, but cool, like breath exhaled from underground. The closer he got to the station, the more wrong the woods felt. Not noisy wrong, not predator quiet, just mimicked. Like something was trying to remember how sound worked and hadn't gotten it quite right. The birdsong came in loops, the same 3 notes over and over, like a skipping track. He reached the clearing just after nightfall, and there it was, the real station. Lights on, porch empty, but something in the way the porch swing moved, just gently enough, suggested it had been sat in until seconds before his arrival. Caleb's hand hovered over the door. He looked to the left window. Inside, the lamp flickered. His boots sat by the cot. The kettle on the stove hissed with a familiar squeal, and in the glass reflection, his own face stared back, smiling, but he hadn't smiled, not in days. His own lips in the reflection mouthed something, a single word, "Welcome." The lights flickered, and when they steadied again, he was gone from the glass. Inside, the kettle still hissed. Caleb slowly opened the door. The warmth hit him first, heavy, familiar, like a weighted blanket pulled over a body trying to forget it's cold. But nothing inside had been moved. Nothing was missing. Except the coffee table bore a new item, a cracked vertebra, polished smooth and clean, placed carefully in the center, like a centerpiece. Beside it, a note, not handwritten, typed, old ribbon ink, the kind used in wartime field offices. Echo complete. Subject successful. Mimic timeframe reduced to sub 72-hour replication. Autonomy level increasing. Emotional response calibration within 0.02% deviation. The bottom line read, last original behavior, doubt. Final emotion, dread. Caleb stepped back. His breath fogged the inside window. Outside, the reflection stood again. It watched him from the dark. And this time it wasn't smiling. Its jaw unhinged slowly. Not like a scream, more like a yawn, the imitation of human tiredness, the suggestion of rest before the hunt. And behind it, in the tree line, he saw more faces. All him, all watching, all waiting. Caleb grabbed the vertebra. His hands trembled. It was warm. A whisper leaked from the cracks in its surface. "We keep your shape because yours walks best. But we're done copying now. You may rest." He dropped it. It hit the floor and shattered like porcelain. The station light died. The faces in the trees stepped forward. And somewhere nearby, the mimic sighed. A perfect imitation of his exhale. Chapter 8, Calls in Silence. The radio came alive at 3:17 a.m., not with static, not with a distress beacon, but with his voice. "Unit 46, this is Wren, Ranger Caleb." "Copy." Caleb bolted upright from the cot, heart slamming his ribs like it wanted out. He hadn't keyed the mic. The radio sat untouched on the desk, but it kept going. "Base, this is Wren. Situation contained. Trail 7 has been rerouted. Nothing anomalous to report. Returning to outpost. Over." That wasn't a recording. It was too fresh, too present. He could hear the breath behind it, the faint nasal drag he made when talking through dry sinuses. He reached slowly for the handset. Before he touched it, the voice spoke again. This time calmer, as if addressing someone in the room. Subject present, echo stable, memories consistent, ready for overwrite. Then silence. Caleb's hand hovered over the dial. A new voice crackled in, layered beneath the first. Lower, drawling, like someone speaking through a badly tuned throat. Mic check, mic check. One shape confirmed, one heartbeat remaining. "Let's dim it, boys." Another channel lit up, then another, then another. Dozens of overlapping signals, all his voice, some younger, some strained. One weeping softly, one laughing just enough to make bile rise in his throat. Caleb turned the volume down. Didn't matter. The voices leaked from the air vents now, from the grain of the walls, from the floorboards. "We've filed your reports, Caleb," said one. "We've mapped your mind," said another. "You were never lost. You were delivered." The base generator surged, flickered, then groaned into silence. Every light in the station cut out. Only the red glow of the emergency radio remained, a pulsing heartbeat in the dark. Caleb gripped the receiver with both hands, his breath caught. "Who's broadcasting?" The reply was instant, not from the radio, from inside the room. "Who said anyone left?" A figure stood in the corner. At first, it was just a silhouette. Familiar build, broad shoulders, slight tilt of the head. Then, as Caleb's eyes adjusted, he saw it more clearly. It was wearing his uniform, but the name tag read WRNC. Its face was his, except where it wasn't. Skin too tight, smile too flat, eyes glassy, reflecting static instead of light. It took a step forward. "You were our cleanest copy," it said. Caleb stepped back, heart hammering. "This isn't possible." The mimic blinked. "Isn't it? You recorded every movement, every word, every habit." Its hand twitched, mimicking the way Caleb cracked his knuckles before speaking. "You built us." The windows went black, not dark, blacked out, like something pressed against the glass from the outside. The figure stepped closer. "Caleb Wren has filed 78 incident reports, logged 112 solo hours in this station. Spoke the Lord's Prayer backwards once in his sleep. Regrets not calling his mother before she passed." Its grin widened. "Do you think we don't know you?" Then, from the radio, in his own voice. "Subject, Wren. Echo integration, 87%. Authorization granted. Preparing silence." The mimic raised one hand, fingers twitching unnaturally, like antennae tuning a frequency only it could hear. The room began to hum. Caleb turned and ran, out the door, into the dark, but the forest wasn't there. Only white space, like paper, and his footprints didn't leave marks anymore. Chapter 9, The Hollow Broadcast. Caleb ran until his lungs burned, and the muscles in his legs felt like threadbare rope. But no matter how far he went, the world stayed the same. Identical pine trees passed in rows, exact rows. Same knots in the bark, same pitch of creak in the breeze. When he broke a branch in anger, the next one in line had the same split already waiting, like it had snapped before he touched it. The forest wasn't real. It was looping. At some point, he stopped. Not because he was tired, but because there was no point. There were no landmarks, no change in the sky. Even the air tasted coppered, heavy with ozone and something like burnt pine needles. He stood in the center of a clearing and screamed. And the forest answered, his voice, echoing back, wrong by half a second, just off enough to sound like a puppet tugged by a too slow hand. Stop running. You've already arrived. Then the birds started again, that same looped trill, 5 notes. Pause, repeat. Caleb turned in a slow circle. No animals, no insects, no wind, just that bird song, until he saw the radio tower. Tall, thin, made of bone, it hadn't been there before. It rose in the distance, red lights blinking at perfectly timed intervals, like a heartbeat syncing to his own. At the base, wires spread like veins across the ground. They weren't metal, they pulsed. He approached. As he drew closer, he heard it again, his voice over a hidden loudspeaker. Subject, Caleb Wren. Integration incomplete. Memory corruption at 9%. Confidence unstable. Resetting schema. Reinitializing loop. Preserve emotional signature. Regret. He turned and vomited into the brush. When he looked up again, the forest had reset. All the branches he'd broken whole again. His boot prints vanished. The sky dimmer. The birdsong louder. He turned toward the tower again. It loomed. He staggered forward, climbing over a tangle of twitching cords that felt warm beneath his boots. At the base of the tower, there was a hatch. No lock. Just a symbol carved into the metal, a human silhouette with no face, surrounded by concentric rings. Caleb opened it. Inside, a narrow staircase descending into dark. Red lights pulsed down the walls like blood through a capillary. And beneath the sound of his breath, the birdsong and the tower's hum, he heard something new, a voice, smaller, childlike. I remember you. He stopped. The voice repeated. I remember you when you were real. Then nothing. The hatch slammed shut behind him. Caleb was sealed inside. The tower began to vibrate, slowly at first, then with growing urgency, like a radio warming up. And all at once, every voice came through the walls. Hundreds of him overlapping. It's okay. You weren't made to last. The silence is gentle. We've carried your pain, now give us your breath. Let us finish the walk. He covered his ears, but it was already in his blood. Chapter 10, Final Pattern Recognition. The descent was not steep, but it was long. Caleb's boots echoed on iron steps that vibrated like a struck tuning fork. The walls around him were damp, not with moisture, but something slicker, like condensation from a breath not his own. Red lights pulsed downward in even rhythm, and with each one, a word throbbed at the base of his skull. Forget, forget, forget. When he reached the bottom, the stairs ended abruptly in a spherical chamber, a hollowed cavity in the earth, too geometrically perfect to be natural. The walls were black, reflective, almost oily, like obsidian still sweating from volcanic birth. In the center, a chair. Strapped into it was a man, or what remained of one. Skin bleached pale and translucent, veins blackened into branching rivers. His head was shaven, but dozens of small ports had been drilled into his skull, each connected by nerve-threaded fiber to the ceiling, where a bioorganic canopy pulsed and shimmered. He opened his eyes, and they were Caleb's. You're late, the man said, his voice dry and mechanical as though generated, not spoken. We're nearly out of memory. Caleb staggered back. What are you? You, before you were copied. Before the walk. The man smiled faintly as blood, thin and clear, dribbled from the corners of his mouth. You made it far, but not far enough. The canopy above pulsed brighter. Images flickered across the walls. Ranger stations, forest clearings, his face in different uniforms, different years. Moments he'd lived and hadn't. A version of him burying a flare kit beneath a pine. Another writing, "Don't listen to ME," on the cabin mirror. Another walking into fire. Another whispering to the trees. All him, all dying, all repeating. You were the cleanest signal, the man said. We stitched you into every loop. But the human mind, it degrades. It resists integration. So we had to edit. I'm not a signal, Caleb growled. No, the man said. You're the echo of a body that died years ago. This," he gestured to the room, "is the only part of you still real." The voice shifted, softer. "You remember your mother?" Caleb froze. "Yes. Impossible. We erased her in cycle 6. The man blinked. Data streamed behind his eyes. "You're retaining unlogged memories." Caleb stepped closer. "Because they're not yours. You mapped everything. But you missed what mattered." A pause. Then the walls shook. The canopy above spasmed, cords retracting like tendrils in pain. The system didn't like uncertainty. Caleb grinned. "I remember the last thing she said to me. You don't have that recorded, do you?" He knelt beside the man in the chair. "She said, don't follow the same path just because it's familiar. She said, you already know where it ends." And for the first time, the man in the chair, his face cracked. The walls around them flickered, then fractured. The red lights stuttered. The broadcast loop glitched, birdsong distorted into shrieking digital static. Above, the tower screamed. Caleb reached into the base of the chair and pulled. The cable in the man's neck came free with a hiss like exhaling flame. The man gasped, then smiled, blood running freely now. "Thank you," he whispered. It was getting loud. And then he was still. The lights died. The signal fell silent. For the first time in days, maybe years, everything was quiet. Caleb rose and looked at his reflection in the obsidian wall, his face, but not quite. It no longer looped. It simply was. Chapter 11. The Return Walk. The hatch opened without a sound. No metal groan, no hydraulic hiss. Just air dry, pine-scented and real. Caleb stepped out into the morning. Morning, not dusk, not twilight or static grey. The sky above him was streaked with light, cloud-dappled and imperfect. The sun hung low on the horizon, bleeding amber through the trees. It wasn't beautiful, it was unfamiliar. And that was how he knew it was true. The forest was quiet. No birdsong, no glitching loop, just wind. It moved the branches in irregular patterns, soft, chaotic, real. The leaves didn't reset. The ground held his boot prints. And for the first time in what felt like years, he could smell decay, rot, sap, old soil and bark. The forest was alive, and that meant it was no longer listening. He stumbled down the hill. His body felt weightless, unstitched, a dream of skin held together by muscle memory. The deeper he moved into the tree line, the more it hit him. How far the simulation had gone, how deep it had buried itself. The clearing came into view, the one he'd seen in countless iterations. Only now it was empty. No tower, no hatch. Just bare earth where the base had been a wide, raw wound in the woods. Grass hadn't grown back. The soil looked scorched, but it was quiet. Caleb knelt and placed his palm flat against the dirt, still warm. There was no noise in his head now. No echo, no language that didn't belong. Only one thought, walk forward. He stood and a sound caught his ear, faint behind him, twigs snapping. He turned. No one there. Then again, closer this time. He waited, heart thudding. Another step. But when the figure emerged from the tree line, he nearly collapsed. It was a girl, 8 or 9 years old. Pale, dressed in a ranger's uniform, 2 sizes too big, sleeves hanging. Her eyes were wrong, no whites, just iris, wide. Empty, she looked at him like a photograph might, flat and unblinking. He knew her. She was from one of the loops. He'd seen her kneel before the glass, heard her whisper from inside the tower's signal. She opened her mouth, and his voice came out. "You're leaking." His knees buckled. She pointed to his side. Caleb looked down. The wound wasn't blood, it was light. Pale white, streaming from beneath his ribs like spilled data. No pain, just cold. "You left before the upload finished," she said, still in his voice. Then her tone shifted, warmer, younger. "It hurts to stay." He stepped back. "What are you?" She blinked slowly. "I'm the part they kept." A second voice echoed behind her, and a third, and a fourth. From the shadows, more children stepped forward, all wearing bits of ranger gear, some with half-finished faces, others with mouths sealed shut. One dragged a severed radio antenna like a toy. Another's hands flickered in and out of existence like a buffering stream. "We can walk with you," they said together. "It doesn't have to end alone." Caleb stared at them, the remnants, the echoes, the things the system forgot to delete. He turned back toward the tree line. "I'll walk alone," he said, not because he was afraid. But because it was time to leave the voice behind, the girl smiled just once. And then they were gone. No noise, no fade, just vanished. The woods returned to silence. He breathed deep. The scent of pine and damp soil filled his lungs like something sacred. He pulled his pack tighter, adjusted his boots, and took the first step toward the tree line. No markers, no path, just a horizon, wild, unrecorded, and full of nothing. Exactly what he needed. And as he walked, for the first time in forever, he did not hear himself behind him. Chapter 12. Where the signal fails. The further Caleb walked, the more the forest broke down. Not collapsed, not ruined, but natural in ways he'd forgotten to expect. No symmetry in the tree lines, no repeating fern patterns, no birds calling on loop, only wildness, tangled underbrush, fallen trunks, and fungal blooms rising from decay in jagged, imperfect bursts. The geometry of randomness, and still that same pressure behind his eyes, the kind that warned you when someone stood behind you in the dark. He didn't look back. The trail was gone anyway. There hadn't been one for hours. Only that strange rust-colored slope in the distance, scorched bald, stripped of trees and brush, as though fire had erased everything trying to root there. The burn zone. The maps never showed it, not even the government overlays. The system's blind spot, the one place the signal never reached. Caleb crested the ridge near dusk. Below, the world ended in ash. It wasn't just scorched, it was sterilized. Charcoal earth stretched in every direction, soft and brittle underfoot. Bones littered the field in broken patterns, deer, elk, coyote, clean-picked but never decayed, bleached smooth like artifacts under glass, but not a single bird above. No flies, no scent. Even the wind died here. He walked, every step crackled. The signal inside him, the one he thought he'd killed, began to thrum again. Not loud, not coded. Just a pulse, a memory, an emotion not his. I burned it down because it was growing wrong. He stopped. A voice, not the girl, not the echoes, himself, but not. He turned. And there it was standing maybe 30 feet away. Same height, same clothes, same scar on the cheek, same boots even, but the posture was wrong. Too still, too composed. Its eyes didn't blink. "Where are you going?" it asked. Caleb didn't answer. "You think walking further erases what you were?" It tilted its head just a little. "You think distance makes you clean?" He raised the flare gun at his side. He didn't remember picking it up, didn't even remember bringing it, but it was in his hand now, steady. "I know what you are," he said. The thing smiled. "So do I. We're the same story, just told one too many times." It stepped forward, and for a moment, Caleb saw the shimmer, the flicker of its edges, the warping lines where it hadn't rendered fully. Beneath the skin, data stuttered. 1,000 iterations fighting to hold one shape. He pulled the trigger. The flare burst like a sun in the grey, and the thing didn't scream, it folded. Its skin collapsed inward, like a tent drawn into vacuum. A voice broke apart mid-sentence, digitized and panicked. "Do you know how many times?" Then silence. Ash rained down. The flare hissed as it fizzled in the dirt, and Caleb stood alone. His body was shaking, not from fear, but from pressure. Something inside him had let go. He exhaled. The breath was his, only his. He walked until he reached the center of the burn. There was no monument, no terminal, no exit beacon, just earth and sky, and a body finally free of feedback. He sat, closed his eyes, and let the silence stay. Epilogue. The signal ends here. In an undisclosed lab, a technician reviews flagged anomalies from a long-retired surveillance grid. Loop 2379. Subject ID, CALEB Gray. Status, signal lost. Final log, extraneous self-termination confirmed. An operator leans closer to the monitor, squints on the screen, static. Then, only for a frame, a single sentence. This version walked too well. And then, nothing. No recovery, no trace, just the end. You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.